Hello everyone, and welcome to another Art Therapy Live here at Hope and Healing at Home. It is Wednesday, January 27th. Today I thought I would focus on anxiety and worry, as it seems like a lot of people in my life are kind of getting tied up by that and needing to address that. So hopefully this will resonate a bit with you. And as per usual, I start out with one simple idea, and now I've got like 5 or 6 going through my head. So I will keep it short and simple today, but in my newsletter I will have other ideas on kind of ways to take this further, maybe even hints at how you could apply these same ideas, same activities to other emotions in your life. And that's one of the things that I really love about art therapy, is its versatility. So a couple of things that influenced me or inspired me in the past week: a live art therapy program put out by Bloom Art Therapy, and they were talking about using art to transform negative thoughts. As I watched that, one of the ideas that sprung up in my memory was gardening with my grandma, and how we always had to, you had to weed the garden, but as part of that process was just the worst part of gardening for me, and it was putting in that manure. I just thought it was disgusting. It was smelly, and of course when we were gardening, there were some days where it was really hot, and can anybody relate to that? Not pleasant. But she had the best gardens ever. She always had super healthy, flowering, everything was so colorful at her house. So good lesson in my childhood about how sometimes we literally have to put the crap in there to bring about beauty. Sometimes those really hard, yucky parts of life actually help produce something great, but we have to be intentional about kind of weaving it in and processing it so that it can produce these beautiful blooms in our lives. 2 other things that had inspired me this past week: one is the Bible study I'm doing called Courageous Simplicity, and on my personal Instagram story, I am putting a daily takeaway or 3 in there in visual form. If you're interested in that, you can pop over to that and gain some more of my insights from that study. It's really hitting home. Every day is something new that I'm like, oh yeah, I need that in my life. But a lot of it really focuses in on, where is my focus? What am I thinking about? Do I have my priorities straight? And as I think about those things and go through that study, I've been really convicted about the things in my life that are causing me anxiety and worry, and how that kind of binds me up in knots. If any of you can relate to that. The last thing that really inspired me this week was a quote that Embodied Art Studio posted, and it's, "Worrying is using your imagination to create something you don't want." And that's a quote by Abraham Hicks. So on to my activities that I really wanted to hit on today. One is something that I like to call flip it journaling. I talk with a lot of my clients about it, especially people who are a little intimidating by the idea of making art. And I think everybody in their lives has done some writing. So all you need really is some paper. It can be in a journal or not in a journal. It could be on a scratch piece of paper. It could be a note card. Whatever it is, whatever feels doable to you. So with flip it journaling, a couple ways to do it is, you could decorate the front of it and do like images that bring about icky feelings and ideas for you. So you could literally, and this doesn't have to be images, it could be ribbon. You could use string and yarn. You could use other pieces of paper to represent it. You could literally like get some yarn or some strings and tie some knots, and then you could glue that down and decorate it to symbolize all the yuck in life. And so you'd open up the journal from this side and you just go to town. Stream of consciousness writing or word vomiting, whatever makes sense in your brain. You don't censor it, just write it, whatever is making you upset. If you're feeling really anxious, you can even do this. Some people are able to do this in the middle of a panic attack, or just before, or just after, and just write all the thoughts that come to mind. Then you literally flip your journal. So maybe on this side of the journal you put peaceful or positive. You could put quotes, fabrics, images. If you like to have even more visual, you could grab the opposite color or just a different drawing material or writing material than you were using on the other side, and be a little more intentional, but still do the stream of consciousness. Don't think about it too much, just get the words down. And here you want to turn to the opposite emotions. So if on this side you're writing all the negative stuff in your life, this side would be the positive. So no matter what is going on to cause you to turn to your journal to get all the yuck out, this is where you dig a little bit more for the treasures. And you could say, the sun was out. The soap bubbles were really pretty while I did the dishes. The dogs are napping. The snowflakes are falling. So maybe on this side, you're talking about barking dogs and how cold it is and how miserable it was to go walking in the snow. But then when you got inside, you realized as you looked out the window, the snowflakes are pretty. And oh, remember, all snowflakes are individual and different, and they're really crystals. And allow your mind to go to the opposite of what was on this side. Another way to do the flip it journaling, some people really struggle with doing something tangible because they're afraid somebody might find it. So if privacy is any kind of an issue at your house, this is great. I'm just going to scribble and pretend I'm writing about all this nasty stuff, okay? So you could, write all over itself and get all of your writing onto one page, and it's okay. You don't have to be able to understand it. And then you grab a different writing utensil and flip your journal and write on top of it. Okay, so you can do this with pencils, pens, colored pencils, crayon, paints. Again, you could just keep scribbling. But remember, once you flip it, if you catch yourself writing more of the negative, you gotta stop yourself and go, oh, that's right, I already flipped my journal. Another option for doing the flip it journal would be to divide your paper in half and put all of your negative things on one side, and you could bullet point it. There's no reason these have to be complete sentences. Whatever is your easiest way of getting it out. And then on the opposite side, you could bullet for bullet create, like if this one said, it's cold outside, the opposite, you could look at the weather. You could be very conscious about being, not word for word, but idea for idea. So it's cold outside, but the sun is shining. It's snowing. It's a snow globe out there. The dogs are crazy. Aren't they playful? Okay, so those a few ideas of kind of a little bit more superficial. All these things matter, but allow this to go deeper. You could say, I'm never enough. Maybe that's one of your thoughts. So as they go a little bit deeper, maybe these negative ideas about who you are a little harder to come up with an opposite. Maybe you want to ask some friends, or in your mind ask them and say, well, what would my friends say about that? Maybe I'm never enough comes to, maybe you just literally start writing the exact opposite. So I'm never enough is I am enough. What's another common negative belief that we have about ourselves would be, maybe there's a body image thing going as I'm so fat. And then you look at yourself and say, what's a compliment? On this negative side, maybe there is a bit of truth in them. Maybe you're not as thin as you want to be, but you're not also so fat. Maybe there's another personal thing that you can look at when you're looking at that. Maybe you're like, I have strong legs. This is an example of kind of flipping it, go from the negative and then intentionally stop yourself. And you can do this, you can do it by number of pages. You could do it until there's nothing left for you to pour out. You could do it by time. You could time yourself and just allow yourself 5 minutes to do the negative brain dump, and then you flip modes and intentionally go to the positive. So once you have your journaling down, maybe this is all you want to do. Maybe you just want to write and leave it. And maybe you want to create something visual. So the idea that sparked in me when I was watching Bloom Art Therapy was this idea of the gardening. Like I said, it reminded me of my grandma and getting the manure down. You do not have to do a gardening theme. Another thing I was thinking of in addition to the gardening theme was like literally taking string ribbon yarn and creating knots and gluing it on the page. So again, you can do this over your writing, or you can have a brand new page and begin a collage there. So maybe you have some things that you want to actually create knots with and get that on the paper. Maybe you want to take little strips of paper and you could write out the worry or the anxiety right on the paper and glue it down. Or another idea here, I can never stop at just one. I hope this does not overwhelm anyone as I'm doing that. You could write all the negative stuff you got going on. Tissue paper is really awesome for this, guys, is you write it all out, and then you could write on the paper, and then you could crinkle up the tissue paper because you can still see it, but it'll have all these great creases in there. So you're literally like crumpling. You could tear up those negative thoughts because you don't want them holding you hostage anymore. And then you could glue them on the paper. Talking about being bound up by anxiety and worry today, and some art therapy ways, artistic, creative ways to kind of identify those things that are worrying and causing us anxiety and how that actually affects us. And then the really important part is then we're flipping it and we're looking for the positive things that we can nurture in ourselves and ways to kind of capture our thoughts, take control of them again, and focus on different things. So you could literally like draw yourself and draw yourself all tied up. You could chain yourself up, put a rope here, and you could have something else over here that you're tied up to, and identify those. So what might be, maybe finances would be something that seems like it's taking you hostage, maybe poor sleep. What are those things that are on your mind? Because literally all of this stuff that's binding us up is really all in our minds. Some of it's going to be based on things that are actually happening in our lives. You know, maybe there's a lost job, maybe there's poor health, all the what ifs, and maybe that feels like there's cracks in the ground that you're standing on. But somehow get it down visually. And again, you can use collages. I have loved this image for a couple weeks. I've been hanging on to it. It actually got some paint splatter from another project I was working on. But maybe you find an image that just represents feeling anxious and what that is feeling like to you. And you're like, how can I transform this? How do I start to unravel the things that are making me anxious? And you can use collage, use drawing, but what might be things that are needed? If you're tied up, could there be a sense of hope? Maybe there's a keyhole in this lock and you can draw some keys. What might be the key that unlocks, in this case, poor sleep? So maybe you want to investigate ways to improve your sleep, like you could put lavender in your room, you could clean your room. Soft music might be a key that unlocks this. Maybe you need a darker room. Maybe you just need to set yourself a regular bedtime, or turn off your phone / news TV 1 hour early. Maybe those are keys that would unlock this chain, this rope that's hanging you out. Finances. What could be something that, again, this is not about being an amazing artist, it's about visually representing it for you so that it makes sense to you. What could be scissors, or maybe you want a big knife that will cut this rope. Maybe for this chain over here, maybe you want to swing an axe because that just feels better to have something more powerful. What are things that can break these chains? Maybe some of these things that you're tangled up in, you may need to zoom in like on a map or an instruction thing, how they have a little detail and then they zoom it out and you can draw these cords that are actually all tangled. Maybe it suddenly starts to make sense to you, and you could write on these things, what are those tangled thoughts? And maybe individually, this is something that I've noticed with a lot of people. Often the things that have us all bound up inside, anxieties and worries, on their own, they're not really that bad. They might not be great, but they seem doable on their own. So maybe you start coming up with some individual solutions to them that feel doable to you. If we wanted to go with the idea of the garden, so if I thought about that whole idea of cleaning up the garden, preparing the garden for growth, part of that is you have the dirt, and you need to churn it up to get some air in there, right? But then you also add manure, stinky manure, and you want it integrated with the soil, right? So while you're thinking about this, you could journal with your chalk pastel pencils about all the things that are stressing you out, that are not going well in your life. And the nice thing with chalk pastels is you could then blur it together. And you could go again on top. You could add another shade. Eventually, what you're going to have as you think about these things is all of what goes into the soil, and there's going to be nutrients down here as well as the manure stuff. You're going to have some flowers that start, right? And all of those have roots down here that grow in amongst and make use of, and they transform these negative things in our life. Just gonna do some real simple flowers, guys. Because I want just the idea for you that these journal things, these art therapy activities, they don't have to take you a long time to be powerful. In a garden, there always seems to me like all of these weeds start cropping up as well. What does it take to do some weeding in your life? You know, what could help you erase these weeds? Maybe it's time alone. Maybe it's going to therapy. Maybe it's doing some journaling to identify what the weeds are and what is needed to pull them out of your life. Somebody once told me that one of the other keys to gardening is planting enough of what you want to grow in the space, and that will help crowd out the sunlight and the space for the weeds to grow. So maybe in addition to getting rid of these things that muck it all up, these weeds that bind you, that take away nutrients from the ground for the good things in your life, maybe we don't have to only focus on them and how to eliminate them. Maybe we also need to focus on things that bring us joy, things that nurture the good in our life. Maybe we need to start naming these flowers. All right, so a couple ideas here. Again, I'm trying to go through so fast. I really need to start limiting myself, don't I, for what I talk about, so I don't have to cruise so quickly. But in Untangling Anxiety and Worry, the flip it journal idea of just getting it out on the paper and then literally flipping, whether you write right on top of the words or you write all your negative stuff out in a column and then you write a positive column of it, or you write out the negative and then you literally flip your journal over and write the good things, the things that bring you hope, the things that are good despite all of the stress, anxiety, worries, fears, bad things in your life. As simple as writing. All you need is some paper and a pencil or a pen. Or you can get a little more creative and start to identify these things that are literally binding you up and possible solutions. Or do it a little bit more abstractly and think in the terms of gardening, of what nurtures your garden, of why the manure is important, what the manure might be doing for your garden, or identifying the weeds and how you pluck them. And at the same time, what are the things that you're doing to nurture your flowers? Because sometimes nurturing the flowers prevents some of the weeds from growing. So, bunch of ideas. I will flesh those out a little bit more in the newsletter And you can sign up for that with the link in my bio or by going to hopeandhealingathome.com. And I got a sign up link there. I hope you enjoyed some of this. Let me know if you have any questions. I know I go through stuff really fast. I always come in intending to do one thing and then a whole bunch of things come to mind. And I'll have those other links and the quotes and things that I mentioned at the beginning of today's live for you in my newsletter as well. So again, thank you for stopping in today. I hope you have a good Wednesday and that you find reasons, despite the chaos, worry, anxiety in your life, I hope you're able to see some of the good things and carve out a little time, even if it's just 5 minutes each day, to look for the good that's also in your life. All right, take care.